Hello, everyone. Welcome to another week of webinars here at Route Consultant. This particular webinar focuses on the emergency medical services industry, or EMS for short, which is a little bit easier. I'm Leah Nelson. I'm part of the education team here at Route Consultant. I usually focus on the financial and analysis aspects of different businesses and industries, which is what we'll be talking about today. So today we are coming together to learn more about the EMS industry and answer any and all questions that you've got. So if you've never joined us for a webinar before, we do have a certain format that we follow. So first we'll cover the content of the week. And at the end, we'll leave time for a Q&A session if anyone has any outstanding questions. Those questions can be pertaining to the topic that we talk about today, or really anything in the EMS industry, questions that you've got, we are absolutely happy to answer. And if you're watching this on YouTube later on, since you won't have the opportunity to ask questions live today, please reach out to us at info@routeconsultant.com for any questions that you've got about the EMS space. Or feel free to join us for our live webinar next week and ask your questions there. So speaking of questions, if you do have a question at any point during the webinar today, make sure that you are dropping those questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the window. If your questions are put in the chat function, I probably won't see them, unfortunately, so I probably won't get to answer them. So please drop your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. So if you joined us before, you all know that Hans is our resident expert here for the EMS industry. If this is your first time with us, Hans has been working in the EMS industry for quite a while, running his own business and helping others start and successfully run theirs. So if you want more information on Hans and his background, I encourage you to visit our YouTube page for all of our previous webinars. Our first one is where we covered a lot of that background, but we've had several since then that have some really great content if you want to check that out. So we'll go ahead and just jump into it today. So today we're going to be chatting about financing EMS businesses, which I know financing is always a really, really hot topic, no matter what the industry is. So with that, we'll go ahead and welcome Hans on.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hey, Leah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. I am great. Always excited to talk to you, talk to the
Absolutely.
people, answer any questions, and hopefully I can help.
Absolutely. Hey, you always do. We always have really, really great content. So we're just going to go ahead and jump in and get started, of course. The big thing I think we want to talk about first is basically the assets of an EMS business, which is normally the ambulances. So trucks and equipment. We'll talk about trucks first. So basically with the ambulances, is it better to, outright buy them, finance them? What are all the things we need to know about financing ambulances in the EMS space?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know what? I think it just depends on the person, right? Or the company that's trying to start or start a company. Like when I first started, I didn't have that much capital. So my first truck was $5,000, right? This was a horrible truck. I probably would never get it again, but I didn't know better, but I was working with what I had, right?
Mhm.
So the average person, I mean, would probably want to start with two trucks. I think if anybody's watched our previous seminars, we always say the rule of two to make sure you have a backup truck for the truck that you're running. So initially you want to start with two trucks, and it just depends on if you're going new or used, right? To me, if you have a lot of capital, why not finance the truck and keep most of your money for other operating expenses like salary, payroll, other supplies, your office space. You can keep that money for that. So to me, my personal experience, it's better to finance because you have a new truck now,
Mhm.
right? With less maintenance costs. So I would prefer to finance, but again, it just depends on that person. You can finance used trucks as well, but if you're going to finance, you might as well get new and minimize the headaches of repairs on a used truck.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And like you mentioned, if you get a newer truck, you may have to, do financing, but you also have way less repair and maintenance in most cases. So you have some savings there as well, which I think is really important to point out. If you weren't able to finance the vehicles, are there any other options for acquiring them, or is it just cash and financing?
Yeah, it's mostly just cash and financing. I've looked at every outlet from Facebook Marketplace to dealers. The good thing is though, now people are financing used vehicles,
Hmm.
right? In the past, banks weren't lending out money to use vehicles as much as they are now. So you have more options to get used trucks financed and new trucks financed. Again, you have to find a deal that's going to work for you, but there are more options out there. And of course, if you can't get financing, depending on your credit or your business credit, then the last option is to purchase outright. And that's where you're really saying, I'm going to have to probably think more of a used truck
Hmm.
and keep my capital for other expenses like we talked about. But if you can't finance again, yes, the other option that I know of is just to buy it outright. You know,
Absolutely. And you're right. It just depends
and
on the, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you know what? I touched somebody said something earlier, but there are business funding as well, right? So
Mhm.
that is another option. We want to make sure that we talk about that. The SBA can provide business funding, like we spoke about earlier. There's all types of business grants and funding out there. You got to find the one that is right for you, of course. That's not really my area of expertise, but I do know people that have acquired their ambulances or any other startup costs through business funding or business loans like the SBA.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can touch on that a little bit too right now. Because the SBA is really good if you're purchasing like an already existing business. Generally,
Mm.
that's what they do. You can use it for truck financing, I think, in some situations, but that's not super common. So you'll have the business you're purchasing as well as the vehicles. And that's when you would normally use the SBA. Just a little kind of interjection on that, because I know in a lot of the other industries, people use the SBA. So we at Route Consultant have a lot of SBA contacts, which is great. And we've got a few of our SBA lenders who are itching to try to finance an EMS business. So that's really exciting that we've got, partners that are willing to do that and excited to do that. Now, that being said, since EMS is really kind of a newer industry for them, they do want buyers and businesses with really like strong and specific qualifications. So for buyers, they're really looking for someone with industry experience. And that's the case in a lot of industries, but particularly with this right now, again, since it's new, industry experience, particularly in healthcare, is great. If the buyer does not have any prior experience, they need to go through like a really thorough education program to prove that they know what they're doing. I know, Route Consultant has master classes and all kinds of courses coming soon that we're going to offer on that. So that would suffice as well if someone wanted to go through the SBA. And then they also, a couple more things, they want the seller from the seller side to provide a pretty hefty transition support. So about 6 months or more is what they're looking for right now. And then, of course, kind of the last thing, and this is how it is with really all SBA deals in my experience, but they want, financially strong buyers, of course, and financially strong businesses that have, clean records and can really comfortably support the debt service. So kind of speaking to that, just like a little aside, if anyone's interested in using the SBA for an EMS business, definitely something we want to try out. So
Yeah. So in your experiences, the SBA, would the interest rates be a lot cheaper or, lower than your traditional financing through a bank or equipment finance company?
generally, they're quite a bit higher. I would say the SBA has
Mm.
probably some of the higher interest rates that you're going to find. That being said, the SBA does have way longer terms. So the amortization, the term of the loans is normally 10 years instead of that 5 year, which is what you normally would get with truck financing or a
Yeah.
conventional lender. So you end up paying a little bit more over time, but on a monthly basis, you have lower payments. So, and another thing about the SBA too, at least I know if you're looking, I don't know quite as much about truck financing, but if you're looking at the SBA versus a conventional lender, the SBA normally is not quite as tight on their buyer qualifications as with conventional lending. So if you have maybe not as strong of a credit history or something like that, maybe you don't own as many assets, it can be a little bit easier to go to the SBA.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great. See, I learned something as well. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I could talk about the SBA all day long.
definitely, definitely. Good stuff.
Well, perfect. Well, we'll hop back kind of to just the vehicle thing because that's of course like a really big and we just kind of talked about the average financing costs for the SBA. What are the average costs for vehicle financing? Do you know?
Oh yeah, new vehicles now. I mean, again, I'm going to always go back to when I first started. When I first started in 2017, 2016, 2017, new vehicles were around 65 to 75,000. Ambulances now, I mean, everything has gone up. We know that. So right now to get a new ambulance, you can spend from 110,000, 100,000 to 115.
That's a big
It's
increase.
yes. And I've seen ambulances 2018, 2019s used between 30 to 50,000.
Hmm.
So you still can get a decent truck. And one of the things that I think people should look at is when you're starting a business, you don't have to necessarily start new. No one's going to know the year between a 2019 Transit and a 2024, right? So you just want to make sure that you can look at certain places like hospitals or fire departments that are ready to turn over their trucks and their trucks have been maintenance very well. You have the records of every time the oil change and tires have been rotated. So you want to take advantage of those deals as well if you can't afford necessarily a new truck. But there are some certain trucks that are right there in that cusp, that 2019, 2021 truck. To me, that's still considered new
Yeah.
in the EMS world. My trucks right now are 2012,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah. And
they're
they're
still
still
going.
running?
Still running beautiful, put new engines in them, new transmissions, and they're going.
Perfect.
So, to each his own. Everybody has to do what fits their budget. And,
Mhm.
so right now, like I said, yeah, to just go back over that, a new truck can go anywhere from 100 to 115,000. And used trucks you'll find for 20 to 60.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, that's a big range. So definitely, evaluate your finances before you pick one as a buyer.
Yeah.
So kind of hopping to equipment that's on the vehicle. Should owners finance any of the equipment that goes on the trucks in addition to the trucks themselves?
The average cost to really stock a vehicle when you're going BLS, basic life support or non-emergency, should be no more than 7 to 10,000. But even now, you can, if you're looking at getting a used truck, most of the times people are selling the equipment that went with that truck. So see if you could work out a deal and
Mm,
package that in into the financing of that truck. If you want to, again, keep most of the capital in your pocket for other operating expenses. That's always a great thing that I tell my mentees. If you can find the equipment and get it with the truck, that'll work perfectly. But I wouldn't suggest financing the equipment and adding interest to something as small as $10,000.
mhm.
If you could just alleviate yourself and take care of that one bulk, expense, I would. And going back to what we were saying before, even when I started with a 2005 and a 2008 and a 2012, all used trucks.
Mhm.
But slowly, as business grew and we became more consistent, I switched them out for newer trucks. So it's not necessarily where you have to start with something new. We started with the 2005 Ford 6.0, and we grew to the 2020s, 2018s back then Ford
Yeah.
Transits. So, but we never financed any equipment. I wouldn't suggest it. I mean, worst case scenario, you can put it on a credit card, I guess, but and hopefully save yourself the high interest rates. But we pay for all of our equipment outright, and some of the equipment you can get used. Again, we're doing BLS, so a lot of the equipment you're really not going to use. It's not hard to find a used stretcher for $2,500
Mhm.
rather than a brand new one for 10,000.
Yeah.
You can probably find right now a used automatic stretcher, which is um not the manual but the motorized stretcher, stretcher, for about 7,000. A new motorized stretcher can go to 20K.
Oh, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, so getting equipment new, or used, it's like a very small difference when you're talking about your nasal cannulas, your breathing, equipment. Some of the supplies you have just to pass your licensing, but the heavy equipment like the stretcher and the AED, you'll find markets out there that have them for use, that have them used for very good prices. So I wouldn't suggest financing them if you
Yeah.
don't have to.
Right. Of course. Yeah. And you want to, if you're going to finance anything, we definitely would, of course, recommend financing the trucks instead of the equipment. So,
Financing the trucks, right? That's the biggest bulk. That's your biggest expense.
yeah.
Finance that.
So, kind of speaking to startup capital and things like that, how much startup capital would you expect a new EMS business to need?
At minimum between 70 and 100K.
Okay.
Again, a lot of that varies. If that owner, if the person starting the business wants to buy their trucks outright, then the startup capital is going to be a lot higher,
Hmm.
depending if they want to buy brand new trucks or used trucks. The biggest part of the startup capital are it's the trucks, right? Once you decide if you're going to go new or used, that's going to make a huge difference on how much money is going to be required for you to start your actual ambulance company. But
Hmm.
you want to look at the timeline. You want to look at, it takes about 6 months to start a company. Now, I'm not too familiar on how long it takes to acquire one, maybe 2 months. Max, you want to go through your due diligence and make sure everything, dot your I's and cross your T's. But you're looking at starting up an ambulance company, 3 months to get licensed, another 2.5 months to get your Medicare, and maybe 2 months to start actually recouping your funds,
Hmm.
right? So you're looking at 8 months there of 8 months of paying your lease. Now your equipment should cost you between $7,000 per vehicle. $7,000 to $10,000. So two trucks, you want to put 20,000 aside for that. And then if you're financing, you want to take the average finance cost on $100,000 truck with probably 10% down is around 1,700. Multiply that by, four. If you get two, then times two, times four, and then
Mhm.
that's probably a good, and then 20,000 in addition for payroll,
Mhm. I was
right?
going to ask
To
what
get you
other expenses need
to
to be
get you
covered with that capital.
Yeah. So you have to get you over the hump when your Medicare and your insurance payments start kicking in. So you want to at least have your payroll if you're starting two trucks. And I would say a safe number is 20,000, you know, and then your 6 months for your truck payments.
Mhm.
And hopefully you aren't financing your equipment, right? And then 6 months of your lease. And then again, I would keep an extra 10 to 20,000 for any unexpected, So it
Perfect.
really just depends. But once you figure out if you're going new or used, that's going to make a world of difference of how much money you need to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. And the rest of that was a really good formula too, just for figuring that out. Like you said, 6 months of truck payments, 6 months of rent. Those are things that you have to consider, really, like I said, in all industries, particularly when you've got debt, making sure you've got, extra on hand just in case, just for emergencies. Never hurts to have extra money.
Yep. And you know what? And I forgot one major thing: 6 months of truck insurance,
Oh, yes, that's a big one. Insurance,
and
definitely a big
that's
one as well.
$15 to $2,000 depending on your driving record and all other factors. So you're looking at the average truck. You want to have maybe $4,000 times $4,000 for 6 months. It's
Mhm.
24,000
Yeah.
per truck, right? Which is 48,000. And then you want to make sure that you have your 6 months of your lease and a little miscellaneous, utility, cell phone, stuff
Mhm.
like that. But a good number is, yeah, 100,000 easily.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's just for two trucks. I mean, I know most people kind of start out with just a few, but if you wanted to do more than that, of course, you'd have to have more capital as well. So everyone
Yes.
keep that in mind. So I guess it kind of hops well into the kind of the next topic, is just being kind of over leveraged with your debt and making sure that you don't ever reach that point. If there are signs of being over
Mhm.
leveraged, of course, would not being able to pay your things. But how would you know in an EMS business if you are over leveraged?
I would, I think again, the one thing that I learned in any business is the one thing you're getting guaranteed you're gonna have debt, right? And I think it's really just depending on a lot of factors of where you're starting your ambulance company. Have you completed your research to see if there's a demand? Are there people expecting you to transport patients? And have you vetted the patients to see what insurance they have,
Mhm.
right? You have to play those things and put those things into place to know if you're over leveraged.
Yeah.
Because now you can see what's coming in and you already know what's going out based on your purchases,
Mhm.
but that'll tell you really if you're spending too much. That's why I say depending on the person and the demand. And one thing that plays a big part of that is if you have any contracts pending,
Yeah.
right? I was on a Zoom call with um, five doctors earlier today from Tampa, and I'm helping a mentee get his company started. So he has a, a abundance of patients ready to go. So
Mhm.
at that point, when you have a contract standing and you see the amount of patients that you're going to transport monthly, you can kind of gauge like, okay, this is where we need to be. We need to have three trucks to facilitate transport for this facility. And this is what we're going to get back. And you can actually figure out, well, your truck note, your insurance, based on what you're going to get with this contract, and that'll let you know. But everything else is unexpected,
Right.
right? So unless, again, you have a contract or you have relationships and you have uh, social workers and nurses saying, hey, we have 4 or 5 patients. We're going to give you all of our discharges, and this is what we're paying you per trip. There's really, it's really difficult to say, am I spending too much? Right?
Mhm.
I think the baseline is you have to start with two trucks,
Right.
right? You can't start with one because if that goes down, then you're
Not good.
starting all over, right? So you have to start with two trucks. And I think if you start with two trucks and you rent a facility that's not too expensive, maybe 1,500 to 2,000, because in the EMS world, you really only need two office spaces, one
Mhm.
for your supplies, one for you. So you don't need to get a 3,000, 4,000 square foot office space, right? At least not to start with. And You don't have to get the fanciest equipment. You don't have to start with a $20,000 stretcher. You can
Right.
start with a $2,500 stretcher. Some of these things you can grow into. I think the only time I see when people over leverage or they just spend too much is when they start with all the newest stuff, which they don't need to do. You
Right.
know, paying people 2 weeks of training. A lot of times you can minimize that by just hiring firefighters, right?
Mhm.
So let's look at these little variables. That is it a need or is it just a want,
Mhm.
right? And I think that helps people say, "Well, we really don't need this, but we want it so we could get it later on. And that'll save yourself from over leveraging, overspending. And so, yeah, I think once you start with 2 trucks, you'll be fine. If you don't know and you're not sure that there's a demand for you to buy 3 or 4 trucks, can you imagine the notes? And now these trucks are sitting and you're paying 3 months or 4 months on, I've seen this. I've seen people start too quickly and have to sell off their trucks and then get the trucks later on.
Mhm.
So I hope that answered that.
No, I think it definitely did. And, just know it because with EMS, you do have to build your client base, if you're not buying an existing business. So making sure that you're like exactly like you said, buying too much at the beginning that you can just add on later on and making sure that you're making enough money and you can afford it and all of those things. So really building that client base and that revenue before you dive in, too deep from like an equipment and truck perspective. And
Yeah,
then once
and
you know,
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was pretty much done.
And in EMS and healthcare, the growth is very it can be slow and methodical, but it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you're providing the best service possible. So growing too fast, you might miss a route, you
Mhm.
might end up being late a lot for certain clients. I grew my company 1 truck at a time. Now, again, if I had to do it over, I would have started with 2, but due to limit, on my capital, I started with 1 truck. But to me, that was a really good way to start outside of the mechanical issues, but just growing and growing my routes and creating my schedule, slowly and organically helped me really grow and sustain all of our customers that we acquired, rather than, hey, I'm going to buy 5 trucks, but I don't know where my customers are coming from,
Right.
and in any state that you go to, it doesn't matter if you're using the trucks or not. If that truck is under your license, it has to have insurance on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 1,500 at minimum you're paying per truck.
Yeah. Is
So
that
now
1,500 monthly?
yes,
Okay. Ooh, yeah, that is that's
yes.
steep.
So that's why I say, unless you know, but while you're growing and you notice there's a demand, then you go buy a second truck, then you go buy a third truck. But now those trucks are paying for themselves as you're getting them,
Yes.
So if a truck sits, you're losing money.
Absolutely. Yeah. Never, like, again, really in any industry, you don't want your equipment and trucks to sit. It's just money lost.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, we'll kind of move on to fuel here and fuel cards, things like that. Should you use a fuel card? Should you just use a credit card, cash? What are your options there?
One of the best things I've done was switch to a fuel card. My
Mhm.
accounting system when I first started was all over the place. I got 5 credit cards. When we grew to 5 trucks, I gave each employee a credit card. There's no way to monitor who's using what. And with credit cards, they can get fuel and they can get snacks. It's all rung up together. You can't differentiate what's for what.
Mhm.
So once we got our accounting system in place, of course, having our fuel cards, it's a net 30 process and it eliminates, I have to pay this now. Oh, on the third, I have to pay this. We know on the first of every month, I think our fuel card was with Racetrack
Mhm.
and it allowed us to go to any gas station. So we got the WEX card that would allow us to go to anything, any gas station. We weren't just stuck with using Racetrack, which helped a lot. But the fuel cards are the way to go. It makes life a whole lot easier. Each employee will have a PIN code assigned to them, so there's use, and you strictly have it set for just fuel only. So yeah, I wouldn't go any other way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fuel cards are definitely important if for, theft and just tracking purposes and knowing how much is spent on each truck. And they've just got absolutely endless uses. I know we've got a fuel card if anyone is interested with
Oh, you do?
RCCI. Do what?
Oh, that's
Mhm.
awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, if anyone is interested in that. But yeah, they've got, just endless benefits, particularly if you've got multiple trucks on the road. And Not that, you don't trust your employees, but you're right. You can grabbing a snack is so easy. And that's, $5 every time somebody goes to the gas station. So you can
I
put
mean, we did the same thing at the fire department. It's not to say they didn't trust us, but everybody had a PIN code. And that means that at some point in the past, somebody used the fuel card to fill up their own car.
yep,
You never know, right? So things happen to put things in place so that we can minimize, loss.
absolutely. Was there anything else, we want to go ahead and add about financing? We've heard a lot about growth too. So, financing growth, really any of those things. Is there anything else we want to add before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would tell anyone, I would advise, just from my experience and me, speaking to plenty of people, countless others that are successful in this EMS world, is financing is the way to go, right? Save your capital. Save your capital for the patients that have high deductibles and you have to transport them for free for a little while. You know, the drought from January to March, where everybody's, riding for free for a little while because they have high deductibles or high out of pockets.
Mhm.
Save your money for those months, right? Save your money for anything unforeseen, government shutdown, whatever can happen.
Right.
You want to save your money for repairs. But if you can finance and just keep most of your capital in your pocket, in your bank, and use it for unexpected, incidents, whatever, I would say that. For raises, if you want to give your employees raises. And so I would definitely, if I had to do it over again, yes, I would finance mostly everything outside of my equipment.
Right.
The trucks, yes, but the equipment I would just pay for it outright.
Absolutely. Well, let's see if we've got any questions here. It doesn't look like we do. So if anybody's got questions, we'll have just a couple of minutes here. So I'm going to go over just a couple of quick things. And if anyone has questions, go ahead and type those out now if you've got them. But if you don't think of one now, if nobody has any questions now, and you do think of one later and you want to ask the team, again, just email us info@routeconsultant.com and we're happy to help you with really anything. If you do want to learn more about the EMS space, we do have our free 101 course on our website that you can sign up for. It's just, a little bit of content just to introduce everyone to the EMS space. Like I said, it's free. See if you like it. And then if you are interested in pursuing more education about the EMS space, we do have our summit on our website as well. So you can learn more about the EMS space in the summit. And really the goal of the summit is for you all as buyers to figure out if this is the industry that you want to go into. So at the end of the summit, we want you to be like, yes, I want to pursue EMS, or no, this is maybe not the industry for me. The other thing you get with the summit as well is an in-person workshop at our Nashville office. So you take the summit online and then we do the in-person workshop just so you can meet the team and just ask more in-person questions and get that really good, like one-on-one personal time. So we've got those on the website if anyone is interested in those. And it looks like my screen is really small. All right, so we don't have any questions right now. So it looks like we'll call it a day. And thank you so much, Hans, for teaching us about financing, and always just thank you for your knowledge in the EMS industry.
You're welcome. I hope I answered all the questions and helped somebody out make their decision if they want to go the EMS route.
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Well, we will see everybody next week.